They cut their father out of the family until the lawyer read his $85 million will. 3 grown children thought they were done with the man they called cold, bitter, and impossible to love. But when the will was opened, it didn't just reveal a fortune. It revealed shocking secrets. Their inheritance came with rules, acts of compassion, acts of forgiveness, and worst of all, the father they abandoned left a stranger the boy he called the son he wished he had in charge of their fate. Now everything they ever wanted hangs on one impossible question. Will this family find redemption or lose everything forever? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Claire Morgan stared at the letter in her hand, the official legal letterhead blurring as tears welled in her eyes. After 12 years of silence, her father had managed to command her attention one final time. She traced her finger over the embossed seal of Hadley Associates, the formal summons to attend the reading of Henry Morgan's will, feeling heavier than the single sheet of paper it was printed on. 12 years, she whispered to her empty kitchen. 12 years without a word, and now this. The last time she'd seen her father, autumn leaves had been falling around them in the driveway of the family home. His face had been carved with disappointment, hers hot with anger. Words had flown between them like shrapnel, accusations about her failed marriage, his emotional absence after their mother died, old wounds ripped open by fresh pain. "I don't need you in my life anymore," she told him, the words hanging in the crisp air between them. His response had been simple and devastating. "Then go." Claire folded the letter precisely along its creases and reached for her phone. William would need to be called first. As the oldest, he'd taken their father's stubbornness as a personal affront, their final argument so explosive that neighbors had spoken of it for months afterward. The phone rang 4 times before he answered. "William Morgan. It's Claire. Did you get a letter about Dad?" A long pause followed, filled with the weight of shared history. "Yeah, yesterday." His voice was carefully neutral. "So, the old man finally died." "Looks that way." Claire picked at a loose thread on her sweater. "Are you going?" "To what? Watch some lawyer tell us he left everything to the railroad museum? Or maybe to that kid he was always mentoring?" Bitterness seeped through his practiced indifference. "What's the point? Closure, maybe." "Closure?" William scoffed. "Dad never gave anyone closure in his life. Why start now?" "I'm going," Claire said firmly. "Tuesday at 10. "Fine, I'll be there." He hung up without saying goodbye. Thomas was easier and harder all at once. The youngest, he'd always been their father's favorite, until he wasn't. His fall from grace had been spectacular, involving a business deal gone wrong and Henry's retirement savings. The rift had been permanent. "Tommy, it's Claire. Let me guess." Thomas's voice carried the artificial brightness he'd perfected in sales. "You're calling about the summons from beyond the grave. So you got it too. Hard to miss a certified letter telling you your estranged father has died." His laugh held no humor. "Think he left us each $1 and a note telling us where we went wrong? That's not funny, Tom. Wasn't meant to be." The false cheerfulness dropped from his voice. "What do you want from me, Claire? Tears? Regrets? Dad made his choice 12 years ago. We all made choices," Claire corrected gently. "And now we get to sit in some stuffy office while a stranger tells us what Dad's final choice was. Fantastic." "Tuesday at 10, Claire reminded him. "Will you be there?" "Wouldn't miss it for the world, sis." The line went dead. Tuesday arrived with appropriate gloom, gray clouds hanging low over the county courthouse. Claire parked her sensible sedan between William's luxury car and Thomas's flashy sports car, symbols of the different paths they'd taken. She spotted William first, his tall frame rigid in an expensive suit as he checked his watch by the courthouse steps. Thomas arrived moments later, sliding sunglasses onto his face despite the cloudy day. The 3 siblings nodded stiffly to each other, exchanging no words as they filed into the building and followed signs to Hadley Associates. They sat in a row of chairs outside the lawyer's office, 3 middle-aged strangers connected only by blood and shared resentment, waiting for the final words of a father they'd shut out of their lives. The lawyer's office smelled of old wood polish and time. Rows of leather-bound law books stood sentinel along the walls, their gold lettering faded, but still dignified. Claire noticed a thin layer of dust on some of the higher shelves and wondered if anyone ever touched those volumes anymore. William sat stiffly in a high-backed chair, checking his watch for the 3rd time in 5 minutes. Thomas slouched beside him, fingers drumming restlessly against his knee. None of them spoke. The door opened and a man in his 60s entered, carrying a worn leather portfolio. Gray hair swept back from a high forehead, wire-rimmed glasses perched on a nose that had been broken at least once. "Good morning," I'm Edward Hadley." He extended his hand to each of them in turn. His handshake was firm, his eyes kind but professional. "I was your father's attorney for nearly 30 years. Let's just get this over with," William muttered. Hadley nodded, settling behind his desk. "I understand. This must be difficult." He opened the portfolio and removed a thick document. "Before I begin, I want to express my condolences. Your father was a remarkable man." Thomas snorted. Claire shot him a warning glance. "We appreciate that, Mr. Hadley," she said quietly. The lawyer cleared his throat. "The last will and testament of Henry Morgan is straightforward in its initial declaration." He began to read, his voice steady. "I, Henry Morgan, being of sound mind." Claire's thoughts drifted. What would her father leave them? His modest home? The old collection of railroad memorabilia? Perhaps nothing at all, a final punishment for their estrangement. "The full sum of my estate, valued at approximately $85 million. Claire's head snapped up. Thomas made a choking sound. William went completely still. "I'm sorry," Claire interrupted. "Did you say $85 million? Hadley looked up from the document. "Yes, Miss Morgan. Your father's estate is valued at approximately $85 million. Thomas laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. "That's impossible. Dad was a railroad engineer. He lived in the same 3-bedroom house for 40 years. He drove a 10-year-old pickup truck. Your father lived modestly by choice, not necessity," Hadley explained. "He made extremely wise investments throughout his career. He owned significant stock in several technology companies from their earliest days, plus considerable real estate holdings and various other assets." William leaned forward. "This is some kind of joke." "I assure you, Mr. Morgan, this is no joke." Hadley slid a statement across the desk. "This is a summary of your father's portfolio as of last month." The siblings stared at the paper, at numbers that seemed to swim before their eyes. Property values, stock holdings, savings accounts, all adding up to a fortune none of them had imagined. "He had all this money," Claire whispered, "and he never told us." "Why would he?" Thomas's voice cracked. "We cut him out of our lives." "Dad was worth $85 million, William repeated, as if saying it aloud might make it comprehensible. "And he lived like a man who valued simplicity," Hadley finished for him. "Your father often told me that wealth was a responsibility, not a privilege." Claire wiped a tear from her cheek. "All those years." William shook his head, eyes fixed on the financial statement. "This has to be a mistake." Hadley closed the first folder with careful precision, his expression neutral but his eyes watchful. "I assure you, Mr. Morgan, there is no mistake about your father's worth." He reached for a second, thicker folder. "However, we've only just begun the reading of your father's will. There are other matters to discuss." Hadley opened the second folder with careful hands. Inside was a sealed envelope, addressed in slanted handwriting that Claire recognized instantly. Her father's script, with its distinctive loop on the capital H. "Your father requested I read this letter verbatim," Hadley said, breaking the seal. "These are his words." The lawyer cleared his throat and began to read. "To my children, William, Claire, and Thomas. If you're hearing this, I've passed on, and you've learned about the fortune I accumulated over my lifetime. I imagine you're surprised, maybe even angry that I kept this from you. But money was never what mattered most to me, family was." Thomas shifted uncomfortably in his chair. William's jaw tightened. "I worked hard and invested wisely, not for my own comfort, but to leave something meaningful behind, something that could change lives, yours and others. But I've watched from a distance as success hardened your hearts. Money won't fix what's broken between us. It might make things worse." Claire felt her cheeks burn. Her father's words cut deeper than she expected. "So, I've made a decision that might seem cruel but comes from love. You will not receive your inheritance outright." "What?" William's voice sliced through the room. Hadley continued reading, undeterred. "Instead, each of you must complete a personal task, a journey of service I've designed specifically for what each of you needs to learn." Thomas laughed bitterly. "Even dead, he's still trying to control us." "William," Hadley read, "my firstborn and most stubborn child. You must mentor a young man I've come to care for deeply. His name is Daniel. Spend 6 months guiding him, teaching him what I would have taught you. Show him the compassion you once showed others before ambition hardened your heart." William stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "Claire, my daughter with a tender heart that grew walls. You will volunteer 3 days a week at Meadowbrook Nursing Home for 6 months. Sit with those who have no visitors. Listen to their stories. Remember the listening you once did so well." Claire wrapped her arms around herself, feeling exposed. "Thomas, my youngest, who chases status and recognition. The community center on Elm Street needs renovation. I've quietly supported it for years. You will personally oversee its restoration, working alongside those who benefit from its services. Learn the value of work done without applause. Thomas slammed his hand on the armrest. This is ridiculous. He can't make us jump through hoops like trained dogs. If all three of you complete these tasks with sincerity, Hadley continued reading, you'll each receive your full inheritance, $28 million. If any of you refuses or fails to complete their task with genuine effort, that portion will go to charity. He can't be serious, William growled from the window. One final condition. Hadley looked up briefly. All three must succeed for any to inherit. You'll need to support each other just as families should. Claire covered her mouth with her hand. He's forcing us to work together. This is his final lesson, his last attempt to rebuild what we lost. I hope you find it in yourselves to try. With eternal love, your father, Henry Morgan. Hadley set the letter down. Your father was very specific about these conditions. They are legally binding. And who judges if we've completed these tasks sincerely? William demanded. That brings me to the final point, Hadley said quietly. The young man your father mentioned, Daniel, is waiting outside. He will be part of this process from the beginning. The siblings exchanged stunned glances as Hadley stood and walked to the door. A heavy silence fell over the room, broken only by the soft ticking of the antique clock on the wall. Hadley opened the door. The hallway's fluorescent light silhouetted a young man who hesitated at the threshold. Daniel stepped into the room, hands fidgeting with the worn cuffs of his jacket. No more than 20, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and earnest brown eyes that scanned the faces before him. Claire noticed his shoes, first work boots, scuffed but clean, the kind her father always wore. This is Daniel Reeves, Hadley introduced him. As your father mentioned in his will, he plays an important role in the conditions of your inheritance. Daniel stood straighter, though his hands still trembled slightly. It's good to finally meet you all. Mr. Morgan talked about you so much. William's eyes narrowed. Funny, he never mentioned you. Daniel swallowed hard. I met your father 6 years ago. I was 14, living in a group home after my parents died in a car accident. Claire felt a small tug of sympathy despite herself. Mr. Morgan was volunteering there, teaching basic carpentry. He noticed I had a knack for fixing things. Daniel's voice grew steadier as he spoke. He started bringing me to his workshop on weekends. Then he helped me get my GED. Last year, he co-signed so I could get my first apartment. Thomas crossed his arms. So you're saying our father was your personal charity case? Daniel shook his head. No, he was. He became family to me. The only family I had. How convenient, William muttered. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out a small worn pocket watch. He gave me this on my 18th birthday, said it belonged to his father. Claire gasped softly. She remembered that watch sitting on her father's nightstand for years. Your father changed my life, Daniel continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper. The last time we spoke, when he was in the hospital, he told me something I'll never forget, he said. Daniel paused, his eyes welling with tears. He said I was the son he wished he had. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. William shot to his feet, face flushed with rage. How dare you come in here and— William, Claire cut in, her own voice strained. Thomas laughed, a hollow sound that held no humor. Well, this just keeps getting better. I know how that sounds, Daniel said quickly. And I'm sorry. But I'm not here to take anything from you. Your father loved you, all of you. He kept every newspaper clipping when Thomas made partner. He had Claire's teaching award framed in his workshop. And William, he followed your accounting firm's success religiously. Yet he told you we weren't good enough, William spat. Daniel shook his head firmly. No, he said he failed you, that he couldn't break through the walls you all built after your mother died. He said his greatest regret was not knowing how to reach you. Claire felt tears threatening. She looked away. Hadley cleared his throat. Daniel is not just a witness to Henry's life. According to the will, he will work alongside each of you during your assigned tasks. He will also provide monthly reports on your progress. You're making him our babysitter? Thomas asked incredulously. I'm making him part of the path forward, Hadley corrected. Henry was explicit. Daniel must be included in this journey if you wish to claim your inheritance. The siblings stared at Daniel, this stranger who had somehow received what they had rejected: their father's time, wisdom, and affection. Henry believed that together you might finally become the family he always hoped for. Hadley concluded quietly. The courthouse steps felt steeper on the way down. William burst through the heavy doors first, his breath forming angry clouds in the crisp fall air. Claire and Thomas followed, with Daniel trailing several steps behind. Dry leaves skittered across the sidewalk as a gust of wind cut through them. Claire pulled her coat tighter, but the cold she felt came from somewhere deeper than the October chill. William spun around, pointing a finger at Daniel. "This is a scam. You're nothing but a con artist who manipulated an old man. That's not true." Daniel stood his ground despite William's imposing stance. "Your father helped me when no one else would." Claire stepped between them. "Let's all calm down. We just need to think this through." "Think what through?" William's voice rose. "How this stranger wormed his way into Dad's life. How he's now part of Dad's will like he's family." Thomas circled Daniel like a prosecutor approaching a witness. "Where's your proof? Letters? Photos? Legal documents showing your relationship with our father?" Daniel reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. "I have pictures of us together, from fishing trips in—" William scoffed. "A few pictures prove nothing. Your father kept a journal," Daniel said quietly. "He wrote in it almost every night. It's back at his house." "Our house?" Thomas corrected sharply. "And I suppose you have a key?" Daniel nodded. "He gave me one years ago." Claire felt a stab of jealousy. This boy had access to their father's home while they remained strangers to it. "How convenient," she murmured, surprising herself with the bitterness in her voice. Daniel looked at her with wounded eyes. "I know this is hard to accept, but your father loved you all so much. He kept track of everything you did. He had a folder for each of you with—" "Stop talking about him like you knew him better than we did," William interrupted. "We're his children." "Then where were you?" Daniel's voice cracked. "Where were you when he had surgery last year? Or when he spent Christmas alone? He reached out to you all, multiple times." Claire looked away, remembering the birthday cards she'd returned unopened. "He made his choice," Thomas said coldly, "and now he's trying to control us from the grave." A woman passed by on the sidewalk, giving them a curious glance. Claire realized they were creating a scene. "This isn't the place," she said quietly. "We should all go home and process this." William glared at Daniel one last time. "Stay away from us. We'll deal with this through the lawyer." The siblings dispersed to their separate cars without another word. Claire slid behind her steering wheel, hands trembling slightly as she turned the key. In her rearview mirror, she glimpsed Daniel still standing on the sidewalk, shoulders slumped, watching them leave. Thomas peeled away first, his sleek sedan accelerating quickly. William followed in his practical SUV. Claire lingered, conflicted emotions churning inside her. As she finally pulled away from the curb, she glanced back one more time. Daniel stood alone now, a solitary figure growing smaller in her mirror. For a brief moment, he reminded her of her father, that same look of quiet resignation as he watched his family drift away. Claire turned the corner, and Daniel vanished from view. The autumn leaves continued to fall, covering the sidewalk where they had stood, arguing over a dead man's wishes and a fortune none of them had known existed until today. The next morning dawned gray and drizzly, matching Claire's mood perfectly. She sat in her car outside Oakwood Nursing Home for 15 minutes, gripping the steering wheel and debating whether to drive away. The brick building with its neat hedges looked harmless enough, but fulfilling her father's conditions felt like surrender. "Just get it over with," she muttered, finally shutting off the engine. The automatic doors slid open with a whoosh. Claire stepped into the lobby, immediately hit by the competing scents of antiseptic and artificial lavender air freshener. A bulletin board displayed activity schedules and birthday announcements in cheerful, oversized letters. At the front desk, a young receptionist smiled brightly. "Can I help you? I'm here to volunteer." The words felt foreign in Claire's mouth. "My name is Claire Morgan." "Oh yes, we've been expecting you." The receptionist pushed a clipboard toward her. "Just sign in here. Debbie will be out in a minute to show you around." Claire scribbled her name, embarrassment washing over her. What did they know about her situation? Had her father arranged all this before his death? A plump woman in purple scrubs bustled in. "You must be Claire. I'm Debbie, the activities coordinator. So wonderful to have you join us." "I'm not exactly joining," Claire began, but Debbie was already walking, chattering about schedules and routines. "We'll start you in the East Wing. Mrs. Hargrove requested you specifically." Claire stopped short. "She what? How would she even know me?" Debbie smiled. Henry talked about his children often. The hallway seemed to narrow at Debbie's words. Claire followed mechanically, mind racing. Her father had talked about her here? What had he said? Room 114 had a handwritten name card. Edith Hargrove. Debbie knocked twice before pushing the door open. "Edith, your visitor is here." A tiny woman with a shock of white hair sat by the window. She turned, piercing blue eyes assessing Claire from head to toe. "So you finally showed up." Her voice was surprisingly strong. Henry said you were the stubborn one. Claire blinked. I thought that was my brother William. Mrs. Hargrove laughed, a delightful cackle that didn't match her frail appearance. Sit down, girl. Don't hover like a nervous bird. Debbie whispered, I'll leave you two to get acquainted, and disappeared. Claire perched on the edge of a chair. You knew my father well? He visited me every Thursday for 5 years. Brought me peppermint patties, even when the nurses said I shouldn't have them. Mrs. Hargrove's eyes twinkled. Said I reminded him of his late wife, too smart for my own good. For the next hour, Mrs. Hargrove talked. About Henry bringing Christmas decorations when the home couldn't afford new ones. About him reading to residents who'd lost their vision. About the loneliness that hung around him like a shadow. He missed you children, something fierce. Mrs. Hargrove said, her tone matter-of-fact rather than accusatory. Kept your pictures right there. She pointed to her nightstand, to remind himself why he kept going. Claire's throat tightened. I didn't know. Course you didn't. You were too busy being hurt. The afternoon stretched on. Claire met other residents who brightened at Henry's name. They shared stories of his kindness, his patience, his solitary sadness. Driving home at dusk, Claire's vision blurred with unshed tears. The nursing home shrank in her rear-view mirror, but the weight of what she'd learned expanded in her chest. What if he just wanted me to see this? She whispered to the empty car. The question hung in the air, unanswered but undeniable, as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Thomas Morgan didn't do rundown. His office overlooked the city skyline. His condo featured marble countertops. His car had that new leather smell. So when he pulled up to the West Side Community Center in his BMW, the contrast hit him like a physical blow. Peeling paint flaked from the brick exterior. Cracked concrete steps led to entrance doors with chipped glass. The sign hung crooked, missing 3 letters. Thomas checked the address twice, convinced there must be some mistake. No way Dad cared about this dump, he muttered, straightening his designer tie. Inside wasn't much better. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, several flickering or burnt out completely. The linoleum floor had worn paths to the main desk, where a middle-aged woman looked up from her computer. Can I help you? I'm Thomas Morgan. I believe you're expecting me. Recognition lit her tired face. Mr. Morgan, yes, of course. I'm Elaine Williams, the director. She hurried around the desk, hand extended. We've been so excited since we got the call about the renovation project. Thomas shook her hand without enthusiasm. Let's get this over with. Show me what needs fixing. Elaine's smile dimmed, but she nodded. This way. She led him through narrow hallways where children darted past, laughing despite their surroundings. In the gym, teenagers played basketball with a ball so worn the grip pattern had disappeared. The hoop hung at an angle. The backboard cracked. As you can see, we make do with what we have, Elaine said. Thomas glanced around, mentally calculating costs. This place needs to be gutted. Your father never thought so. He always said the heart of the center was its people, not its walls. Thomas snorted. My father was a railroad engineer who lived in a shabby house and drove the same truck for 20 years. He wasn't exactly an authority on quality. Elaine stopped walking. He was an authority on what mattered. She pulled a folder from under her arm. I thought you might want to see these. Thomas took the folder reluctantly. Inside were letters, dozens of them. All from Henry Morgan, each accompanying a donation check. These go back 15 years, Elaine explained. Every month, without fail. Thomas flipped through them, his confidence faltering. The amounts increased over time, 500, 1,000, 2,000, 500 per month. Simple notes accompanied each. For the basketball program. To fix the roof. For summer lunches. This can't be right, Thomas said. These amounts were more than he could easily afford, Elaine finished. We knew that. I tried to refuse the larger ones, but he insisted. Thomas did the math quickly. His father had given away over $500,000 to this place. He never told us, Thomas said, voice suddenly small. He didn't do it for recognition. Elaine touched his arm gently. I'll give you a minute. When she left, Thomas wandered to the far wall of the gym. There, nearly hidden behind a stack of folding chairs, hung a small bronze plaque, tarnished with age. Gymnasium renovated by Henry Morgan. It read simply, so children always have a place to play. Thomas ran his fingers over his father's engraved name, throat tight with an unfamiliar feeling. Why didn't you tell us? He whispered, the empty gym offering no answer. But somewhere deep inside, Thomas suspected he already knew. William Morgan arrived 15 minutes early to stake his territory. He chose the corner table at Brewster's coffee shop, positioned so his back faced the wall and he could watch the door. Old habits from 30 years in accounting always control what you can. He ordered black coffee, no sugar, the same drink his father preferred. The bell above the door chimed at exactly 2:00 p.m. Daniel stepped in, scanning the shop until his eyes found William. The boy, no, young man looked nothing like Henry. Slender where Henry had been solid, hesitant where Henry had been certain. Yet something in his careful movements reminded William painfully of his father. "Mr. Morgan," Daniel said, approaching the table. "Thank you for meeting me." William didn't stand. "Sit down." Daniel slid into the chair opposite, hands folded neatly on the table. "Would you like me to get another coffee for you?" "I'm fine." William studied him coldly. "Let's get this over with." A moment of awkward silence stretched between them. Daniel cleared his throat. "Your father was a good man, so everyone keeps telling me." William's voice could have frozen the coffee in his cup. Daniel nodded, seeming to gather himself. "The first time I met Henry, I was trying to steal his toolbox from his garage." This caught William off guard. "What?" "I was 16, homeless, desperate." Daniel's eyes remained steady. "Instead of calling the police, he made me breakfast. Said he'd been waiting for someone to help him organize his fishing tackle." William's jaw tightened. Henry had taught him to fish when he was 8. The memory of his father's patient hands showing him how to tie a proper knot surfaced unexpectedly. "He took me fishing that weekend," Daniel continued softly. "Said I reminded him of his oldest son, how you both had the same serious look when concentrating." "Stop." William's hand clenched around his mug, but Daniel pressed on. "When my bike broke, he showed me how to fix it. Said you had been the same way with your first bicycle, determined to understand how every part worked." Each word landed like a physical blow. These were William's memories, his moments with his father now given away to this stranger. "He kept your trophies displayed in his study," Daniel said. "The math competitions, the accounting awards. He was so proud." William slammed his hand on the table, coffee sloshing over the rim of his mug. "Enough! You had no right to any of that. Those were my moments, my father, and you stole him." The cafe went quiet. Other patrons glanced their way before quickly averting their eyes. Daniel didn't flinch. "He never stopped loving you, William. Not for a single day. If that were true, he would have called. He would have visited. He would have tried." "He did try." Daniel reached into his jacket and pulled out a sealed envelope yellowed with age. "This is one of dozens. He wrote to you every month for years. You sent them all back unopened." William stared at the envelope. His father's handwriting, neat, precise capitals, spelled out his name. "He wanted you to have this one, no matter what." Daniel placed it on the table between them. "Even if it came after he was gone." William didn't touch it. "Couldn't. I never stole your father's love," Daniel said quietly, standing to leave. "There was always enough for all of us." Hours later, William sat alone in his car, interior light casting shadows across his face. The envelope lay heavy in his hands. His fingers traced his name, feeling the indentations where his father had pressed pen to paper. They trembled as he turned the envelope over, again and again, unable to break the seal. The morning light sliced through the gaps in William's blinds, cutting sharp lines across his living room. He sat in the same chair he'd collapsed into the night before, tie loosened, shirt wrinkled. The table lamp still burned despite the dawn, a pointless beacon through the sleepless night. The envelope sat on the coffee table, untouched since he'd placed it there hours ago. William had spent the night staring at it, getting up occasionally to pace, pour a drink, then return to his vigil. His eyes burned from fatigue, but sleep remained impossible. That handwriting, those perfect, measured capital letters. His father had always written that way, precise, deliberate. Even shopping lists looked like military correspondence. William reached for his coffee mug, now empty and cold. The house felt too quiet, filled only with the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, another piece of his father that had somehow followed him through life. "Just open it," he muttered to himself. His fingers trembled as he finally reached for the envelope. The paper felt delicate, like it might dissolve at his touch. How long had his father held on to this before giving it to Daniel? How many times had Henry Morgan sealed his thoughts away, only to have them returned unopened? William slid his thumb under the flap and tore it open with one quick motion before he could change his mind. The letter was written on plain stationery, dated 12 years earlier, just 3 months after their final argument. William unfolded it carefully, smoothing the creases with his palm. "Dear William, I've started this letter 100 times. The words never come out right. Maybe that's always been our problem. I never found the right words with you. Yesterday, I saw your name in the paper. William Morgan named partner at Bradshaw Accounting. I cut it out. It's on my refrigerator. I tell everyone who visits that my son did that. I want you to know I've always been proud of you. Even when we fought, even when you walked away, you built something I never could, a career that matters. Respect from people who count. You did it your way, not mine. That took courage I never had. About our last fight, you were right. I was too stubborn, too set in my ways. When your mother died, I didn't know how to be both parents. I tried to be strong when I should have been soft. I pushed when I should have listened. I miss you, son. I miss your voice. I miss your arguments, even the ones where you proved me wrong. Especially those. If you're reading this, maybe there's hope for us yet. Love always, Dad. The paper trembled in William's hands. He blinked rapidly, but tears blurred his vision anyway, distorting his father's words into watery smudges. A single drop fell onto the page, spreading like a tiny nova across his father's signature. Damn it, Dad, William whispered, his voice breaking. All those years wasted, all those letters returned. The birthdays, holidays, and ordinary days that could have been something more than empty spaces on a calendar. William carefully folded the letter along its original creases. The morning light had strengthened, warming the room in golden hues. He held the letter against his chest, feeling the weight of his father's words against his heart. Outside his window, the sun climbed higher, casting the world in fresh light. William closed his eyes, finally allowing exhaustion to overtake him, his father's words cradled close. 5 days after opening his father's letter, William found himself back in the lawyer's office, perched stiffly on the same leather chair that had supported him during the initial reading of the will. The room seemed smaller now, more cramped with all four of them, Claire, Thomas, Daniel, and himself seated in a tense half-circle before Mr. Abernathy's imposing oak desk. Claire arrived last, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, less polished than her usual appearance. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Sorry I'm late, she mumbled, settling into the remaining chair. Mrs. Hargrove needed help with her physical therapy. Mr. Abernathy nodded, hands folded over a manila folder. Thank you all for coming. Henry's will stipulated regular check-ins on your progress. He glanced at each of them. Perhaps you could share how things are going? Silence filled the room, thick and uncomfortable. None of them wanted to be the first to speak. Claire cleared her throat. The nursing home island. Not what I expected. She twisted a silver ring on her finger. Mrs. Hargrove, this woman I've been spending time with, she knew Dad. Said he used to bring her homemade bread every Sunday after Mom died. Thomas looked up sharply. Dad baked? Apparently. Claire gave a small smile. She said he was terrible at it at first, loaves hard as bricks, but he kept trying. Thomas shifted in his seat. The community center's worse than I thought. Roof leaks in 3 places. Basketball courts cracked right down the middle. He paused. But these kids, they don't care. They're just happy someone's paying attention to them. His voice softened. One boy asked if I was Mr. Morgan's son. Said Dad taught him how to shoot hoops. William stared at his hands, surprised to hear his brothers and sister sharing anything positive. The letter burned in his pocket where he'd kept it since reading it. He hadn't planned to mention it. Dad wrote me letters, he said suddenly. Dozens, maybe. I never opened them. Daniel gave me one. He swallowed hard. He was proud of me. That's what he wrote, all this time. Daniel, who had remained quiet in the corner chair, looked up with surprise. His eyes were kind, not gloating as William had expected. Mr. Abernathy nodded thoughtfully. This is precisely what Henry hoped for, that you'd begin to see him differently. But remember, these tasks aren't just about discovery. They require consistent effort over time. He tapped the folder. The inheritance conditions are quite specific. 6 months minimum. 6 months? Thomas groaned. That community center needs years of work. Then hire contractors, Claire snapped. Some of us have actual jobs. You think visiting old people once a week is harder than... That's enough, William cut in, surprising even himself. We've all got our assignments. Fighting won't change that. Mr. Abernathy smiled slightly. I'll need weekly reports from each of you. Daniel will also provide his observations. They all glanced at Daniel, who looked uncomfortable with his role as evaluator. I'm not here to judge you, Daniel said quietly. I just want to honor Henry's wishes. When the meeting ended, they filed out together, no one rushing ahead or lagging behind. The awkward silence that fell over them as they walked down the courthouse steps wasn't friendly, but it wasn't hostile either. At the bottom, they paused, uncertain how to part. Same time next week? Claire finally asked. Thomas nodded. William gave a slight shrug that wasn't quite a rejection. As they separated toward their cars, none of them stormed away. It was a small thing, this lack of anger, but it felt like the first delicate root of something that might, with care, eventually grow. 2 days after the lawyers' meeting, Claire found herself back at Riverside Nursing Home, arranging dominoes on a small table near the sunroom windows. Mrs. Hargrove sat across from her, wrinkled hands hovering over the pieces with surprising steadiness. "You're quieter than usual today," Mrs. Hargrove observed, knocking over a domino deliberately. "Thinking about your father?" Claire nodded. "We had a meeting about his will. My brothers were almost civil. Miracles never cease." Mrs. Hargrove's eyes twinkled. Henry would be pleased. A nurse wheeled several more residents into the sunroom for afternoon activities. The warm October sun streamed through the windows, casting golden rectangles across the worn carpet. "You know what we need?" Mrs. Hargrove announced, pushing the dominoes aside. "Some music. Henry always said a good song could mend what words couldn't." Claire tensed. "I don't think—" "There's a piano right there, collecting dust." Mrs. Hargrove pointed her gnarled finger toward an upright piano tucked in the corner. "Henry used to hum that old hymn whenever he visited. What was it called?" "Amazing Grace," Claire whispered before she could stop herself. Mrs. Hargrove's face lit up. "That's the one. He said his wife, your mother, used to sing it while doing dishes." She tilted her head. "Can you sing it for us, dear?" Claire felt heat rush to her face. "I haven't sung in years. Perfect time to start again." Mrs. Hargrove was already waving to the other residents. "Everyone, Claire's going to sing for us." Trapped by expectant eyes, Claire reluctantly moved to the piano. Her fingers trembled as they found the keys. She'd taken lessons as a child but had abandoned music after her mother died. The first notes came out hesitant and slightly off-key. "Amazing Grace," she began, voice barely above a whisper. How sweet the sound. Her voice cracked on the second line. She almost stopped, embarrassment burning through her, when Mr. Jenkins, a usually silent man in the corner, joined in with a wavering baritone. Then Mrs. Petersham added her thin soprano. One by one, cracked and wobbly voices rose around her. Claire's fingers grew steadier on the keys. The next verse came easier, her voice finding strength in theirs. Some residents couldn't remember all the words, humming along instead. Others sang with closed eyes, transported to some distant memory. The final notes lingered in the sunroom. Claire looked up to find Mrs. Hargrove dabbing her eyes with a tissue. "Henry said you had your mother's voice," Mrs. Hargrove murmured. "He was right." Something warm unfurled in Claire's chest, not pride, but something gentler. Connection. These people had shared a part of her father she'd refused to see. They'd witnessed his loyalty, his quiet persistence, his loneliness. She played another song, then another. The afternoon slipped away in music and laughter, the residents sharing stories between songs, many featuring her father's kindness in ways she'd never known. Driving home at sunset, Claire felt lighter than she had in years. The realization hit her suddenly. This was what her father wanted her to find. Not just guilt or obligation, but human connection. The very thing she'd denied him. That night, sitting on her couch with a cup of tea, Claire picked up her phone. She scrolled to Thomas's number, a contact rarely used except for holiday coordination and occasional family business. She hesitated only a moment before pressing call. "Claire?" Thomas answered, surprise evident in his voice. "Everything okay?" "Everything's fine," she said softly. "I just wanted to hear your voice." The Saturday morning sun streamed through the community center's dusty windows as Thomas checked items off his clipboard. He'd managed to rally 20 volunteers, some local contractors he knew, a few college students, and several families from the neighborhood. "We need that blue paint over by the west wall," Thomas called out, pointing with his pen. "And careful with those ladders, kids." Children darted between adults, carrying brushes too big for their small hands, their excitement filling the old gymnasium with energy Thomas hadn't felt in years. The echoing sounds of scraping, hammering, and laughter blended into a symphony of renewal. "Mr. Morgan?" A small boy tugged at Thomas's sleeve. "Can I help with the basketball lines?" Thomas smiled despite himself. "Sure thing, buddy. Let's get you some tape to mark the boundaries." Outside, workers poured fresh concrete to patch the cracked court. Thomas had hired professionals for that job, no sense cutting corners on safety. He'd already ordered new hoops and backboards to replace the rusted, bent ones that had somehow survived decades of use. "You've done an amazing job organizing this," said Maria Rodriguez, the center's director. She handed Thomas a cold water bottle. "When you first showed up, I thought you'd just write a check and disappear." Thomas wiped sweat from his forehead. "That was the original plan. Your father would be proud," Maria said, gesturing around. "He loved this place." "So I keep hearing," Thomas replied, unable to hide the edge in his voice. Maria studied him for a moment, then motioned for him to follow. "Come with me. There's something you should see. She led him to a small storage room off the main office and dug through a filing cabinet. Here, she said, pulling out a worn manila folder labeled Court Renovation 2010. Inside were receipts for lumber, concrete, paint, and tools, all with Henry Morgan's signature. Stapled to them was a timesheet with dates and hours, all in his father's neat handwriting. Your father came here every evening for 3 weeks straight, Maria explained. After his regular job. The court was dangerous. Kids were getting hurt on the cracks. We couldn't afford contractors. Thomas flipped through photos showing Henry looking older than Thomas remembered him, kneeling on concrete, leveling the surface with tools Thomas didn't even know his father owned. He did this himself? All of it? Maria nodded. Refused help most days. Said he liked working with his hands. The kids would bring him lemonade. Thomas stared at a photo of Henry surrounded by smiling children. His father's usually stern face relaxed into a genuine smile. Why didn't he ever mention this? I asked him once, Maria said softly. He just said, good work speaks for itself. Hours later, as sunset painted the gym walls gold, Thomas thanked the last volunteers and locked the supply closets. The center was transforming. Bright walls replaced dingy ones, the smell of fresh paint promising new beginnings. Alone in the gym, Thomas picked up a basketball someone had left behind. The hollow thump of the ball against the newly finished court echoed through the empty space. He dribbled slowly to the free throw line, the rhythm of the ball against concrete strangely comforting. Thomas took a shot. The ball arced perfectly through the new net with a satisfying swish. His father had stood in this very spot, had poured concrete with his own hands so children could play safely, had done it quietly, without recognition or praise. Thomas dribbled once more, the sound echoing in the empty gym. I never saw you, he whispered, fingers tracing the smooth surface of the ball. I never really saw you at all, Dad. William arrived at Carson's Cafe 15 minutes early. He chose a corner table, ordered black coffee, and arranged the papers he'd brought, career planning worksheets and salary statistics he'd printed from his office. Professional, methodical, the way Henry had taught him to approach problems. The bell above the door jingled as Daniel walked in. The young man wore a faded blue button-down and carried a worn notebook. His face brightened when he spotted William, and he raised a hand in greeting. Sorry, I'm a little late, Daniel said, sliding into the chair opposite William. You're not late. I was early. William pushed a mug toward him. I ordered you coffee. Thanks. Daniel wrapped his hands around the mug but didn't drink. So, mentoring. I wasn't sure what to expect. William slid the papers across the table. I thought we'd start by discussing realistic career trajectories. I looked into entry-level positions in automotive repair, since you mentioned an interest in mechanics. Daniel's eyes widened as he scanned the figures. These salaries seem low. That's reality, William said, tapping the paper. Starting positions rarely pay well. You need to adjust your expectations. I was actually thinking about mechanical engineering, not just repair work. Daniel pulled his notebook from his bag and opened it to reveal detailed sketches of engine modifications. I've been designing this hybrid system that could improve fuel efficiency by... William cut him off with a dismissive wave. Engineering requires years of university education. Do you have the grades for that? The money? I could get scholarships. Henry said a lot of things, William interrupted, his voice sharper than intended. But wishing doesn't make something true. Dreams are fine, but you need practical goals. Daniel's face flushed. Your father believed I could do it. He saw potential in me that nobody else did. My father, William emphasized the word, was good at making people feel special. That doesn't mean he was right. The cafe had grown quieter. At nearby tables, people pretended not to listen. You don't get it, do you? Daniel's voice rose. Henry wasn't just being nice. He actually helped me. He taught me to believe in myself when everyone else had given up. And look where that got him, William said coldly. Alone, with his own children not speaking to him. Daniel slammed his hand on the table, rattling the mugs. That wasn't his fault. He talked about you all the time, William the successful accountant. William the smart one. He was so proud, even when you wouldn't return his calls. Heads turned openly now. A waitress hovered uncertainly nearby. You have no idea what happened between us, William hissed. I know he wrote you letters every month. Daniel fired back. Letters you never opened. Do you know how much that hurt him? But he never stopped trying. Never stopped loving you. Don't presume to tell me about my own father. Someone needs to. You're so busy being angry you can't see what was right in front of you. William stood abruptly, knocking his chair backward. This mentorship is a waste of time. You're just like him, full of impractical dreams, and at least I listened to him. Daniel gathered his notebook, eyes bright with tears. At least I was there when he needed someone. Daniel stormed toward the door, shoulders rigid. The bell jangled violently as he slammed it behind him. William remained standing, acutely aware of the stares from other customers. Heat crawled up his neck. He slowly righted his chair and sank into it, staring at Daniel's untouched coffee. The anger drained from him, leaving something worse in its place. Shame burned in his chest as he realized how much he'd sounded like his younger self, the arrogant son who thought he knew better than everyone, especially his father. The Morgan family home stood unchanged, a white two-story colonial with blue shutters and a wraparound porch that had weathered 30 Michigan winters. Claire parked at the curb and killed the engine, but nobody moved to get out. "I can't believe it hasn't sold yet," Thomas said, breaking the silence. William stared through the windshield. "Last time I was here, we were clearing out Dad's clothes." Claire turned to Daniel in the back seat. "You've been here more recently than any of us." Daniel nodded, his fingers fidgeting with his jacket zipper. "Henry and I fixed up the back porch last summer. The realtor said it would help with the sale." A week had passed since William and Daniel's blow-up at the cafe. Neither had mentioned it, but the tension lingered like a bruise, visible but fading. "Let's get this over with," William muttered, pushing his door open. The key stuck in the lock it always had, requiring Claire's special touch, a jiggle and a lift that Henry had taught her as a child. Inside, dust motes danced in sunlight that streamed through the windows. The furniture was gone, but the house still smelled like home pine floors and the faint trace of Henry's pipe tobacco. "The lawyer said we should check the attic for personal items before the final sale," Claire said, heading for the stairs. They climbed single file to the second floor, then pulled down the creaking attic ladder. The space above was hot and musty, lit only by a small window at the far end. "There's a light cord somewhere," Thomas said, waving his hand in the darkness until he found it. A bare bulb flickered on, revealing piles of cardboard boxes and forgotten furniture. "Dad kept everything," Claire said, moving toward a stack of photo albums. William gravitated to a worn leather toolbox in the corner. He ran his fingers over the brass clasp, remembering his father's hands doing the same. "That's where he kept his special tools," Daniel said quietly, "the ones that belonged to his father." William flipped the latch and lifted the lid. Inside lay perfectly arranged wrenches, hammers, and screwdrivers, each with a worn wooden handle. "He showed you these?" William asked, his voice tight. Daniel nodded. "He told me about his dad teaching him to build things. Said his father could fix anything with these tools." "That's exactly what he told us," Thomas said, pulling down a dusty fishing rod. "Remember when he took us to Benson Lake, Will? He said Grandpa caught a bass this big." He stretched his arms wide. "The fish got bigger every time he told that story." Claire laughed, opening a photo album. "Look at these." They gathered around as she turned pages of faded photographs. Henry teaching William to ride a bike, Thomas on Henry's shoulders at a parade, Claire in a tutu, while Henry clapped from the audience. "I've seen these," Daniel said softly. "He showed me all of them." Claire turned another page. There was Henry in his railroad uniform, young and proud. "He told me he became an engineer because he wanted to see what was around the next bend," she said. "He told me the same thing," Daniel whispered. William looked up sharply. "Word for word?" Daniel nodded. "He'd say it when we worked on engines together." One by one, they began sharing stories, the same advice, the same jokes, the same expressions. Henry hadn't created new memories with Daniel. He'd relived his favorite moments with his children. As afternoon faded into evening, they found themselves on the porch, watching the sun sink behind neighborhood rooftops. No one spoke. The revelation settled over them like a blanket. Henry hadn't replaced them with Daniel. He'd been desperately holding on to what he'd lost. The sunset painted the sky in stripes of orange and purple, just as it had when they were children, and Henry would call them to watch what he called God's goodnight painting. In the gathering dusk, 4 silhouettes sat side by side, connected by memories of a man who had never stopped loving his family, even when they weren't there to love him back. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright as Thomas pulled up to the community center with a truck full of painting supplies. He wasn't expecting to see William's sedan already parked outside, nor Claire's compact car beside it. His chest tightened with an unfamiliar feeling, hope. "We figured you could use some help," Claire called, stepping out of the shade of the building's entrance. She wore old jeans and a faded t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. William emerged behind her, dressed similarly in clothes meant for work. "Daniel's inside setting up," said something about proper paint roller technique. Thomas couldn't hide his surprise. "You all planned this?" "Claire organized it," William admitted. Said if we're going to fulfill Dad's conditions, we might as well do it together. Inside, Daniel had already laid out drop cloths and opened several paint cans. The community center's main hall echoed with emptiness, walls scraped and prepped for a fresh coat. I got us started, Daniel said, demonstrating how to load a roller. The director said they've wanted to repaint this place for years. Thomas handed out brushes and rollers. Dad always said painting is 90% preparation, 10% application, and 100% cursing when you get it on your clothes, Claire added, making them all chuckle. They worked in pairs, Daniel and William tackling one wall, while Claire and Thomas handled another. The silence was comfortable at first, broken only by the sound of rollers on drywall and brushes on trim. Remember when Dad painted the kitchen? Claire said suddenly. Mom wanted yellow, but he accidentally bought orange. Thomas laughed. She was so mad, but he convinced her it was sunrise gold instead of orange. And she believed him? Daniel asked, pausing mid-stroke. Not for a second, William replied, surprising everyone with his smile. But she let him think she did. That was their way. More stories emerged as they worked Henry teaching them to change oil in the car. His failed attempts at baking birthday cakes. The time he built a treehouse that leaned so badly, they named it the Tower of Pisa. He tried to teach me how to bake too, Daniel shared, his brush carefully tracing the edge of a window frame. We burned 2 batches of cookies before giving up and buying some. They laughed together, the sound bouncing off the walls they were transforming. Paint speckled their clothes and faces, but no one seemed to mind. By mid-afternoon, they had completed half the hall, the walls gleaming with fresh color. This place is going to look amazing, Claire said, stepping back to admire their work. Dad would be proud, Thomas added quietly. When darkness fell, they ordered pizzas and sat cross-legged on the drop cloths, passing paper plates and napkins. Their muscles ached pleasantly from the day's labor, and the smell of fresh paint hung in the air. I forgot what it feels like, Claire said, working together like this. Like family, Daniel added softly. No one contradicted him. For the first time, his presence felt right, a bridge rather than a barrier. William reached for his soda can, raising it in the air. His face, usually hard with resentment, had softened in the warm glow of the temporary lights. To Dad, he said simply. 3 other cans rose to meet his. To Dad, they echoed. And in that moment, Henry's presence seemed to fill the freshly painted room, wrapping around them like an embrace they hadn't felt in years. A week later, the Morgan siblings walked into Attorney James Harrington's office with lightened steps. Their shared work at the community center had created a bridge between them, and even Daniel seemed more at ease in their presence. The old oak-paneled office that had once felt suffocating now held promise. You all seem in good spirits, Harrington noted, adjusting his reading glasses as they settled into their chairs. We've made progress, Claire said, exchanging small smiles with her brothers. Thomas nodded. The community center renovations are almost complete. And William? The lawyer turned to the eldest sibling. William cleared his throat. Daniel and I have been working together. It's been educational. Daniel sat slightly apart from the siblings, hands folded in his lap, a tentative smile on his face. Well, I'm pleased to hear it, Harrington said, opening his leather portfolio. Given your progress, I believe it's time to discuss the final provisions of your father's will. The siblings leaned forward expectantly. This was the moment they'd been working toward, final confirmation that they'd fulfilled Henry's conditions. There is one final element of your father's will that I was instructed to reveal only once you showed initial signs of change. Harrington pulled out a sealed envelope, a codicil that Henry added shortly before his passing. The atmosphere in the room shifted subtly as Harrington broke the seal and unfolded the document. Your father understood that true change comes from the heart, not from actions performed solely for financial gain, he read, Henry's words filling the silent room. Therefore, I have appointed one person who knew me in my final years to determine if your transformations are genuine. Claire's smile faltered. What does that mean? Harrington continued reading. Daniel Allen will have the final authority to determine whether each of you has sincerely changed. If he determines your efforts were merely to secure your inheritance, he has my authorization to redirect your portions to my established charities. The silence that followed was absolute. This is a joke, Thomas said finally, his voice hollow. Daniel's face had gone pale. I didn't know, he whispered. I swear I didn't know about this. William stood slowly, his chair scraping across the hardwood floor. You're telling us that this kid gets to decide if we're worthy? His voice rose with each word. Our own father didn't trust us enough to judge our intentions, so he left it to a stranger? William, Claire pleaded. Daniel isn't. He is a stranger, William thundered. A stranger who spent, 5 years with Dad, while we were his children for decades? Mr. Morgan, Harrington began. My father felt nothing for us, William cut in. This proves it. This was never about reconciliation. It was about control. Even from the grave, he couldn't help but pull the strings. Outside, rain had begun to fall, pattering against the windows. Daniel stood, reaching toward William. Please, I don't want this power. I'll tell everyone right now that you've changed. That, don't you dare pity us, William snarled. This whole thing was a setup from the start. You were probably in on it all along. That's not true, Daniel protested. William stormed toward the door, yanking it open with such force that the wood cracked against the wall. William, Claire called after him. He paused in the doorway, rain visible beyond his silhouette. This is too far, he shouted, his voice breaking. The door slammed behind him, leaving only the sound of rain and shocked silence. The rain hadn't stopped since they left the lawyer's office. Claire paced her living room, phone pressed to her ear, listening to William's rage pour through the speaker. I'm telling you, Claire, I'm done. I won't be manipulated anymore. Not by Dad, not by his pet project, not by anyone. Claire wiped tears from her cheeks. Please, William, we've come so far. For what? So some kid can judge whether we're worthy of our own father's money? Money he never told us he had? Her phone beeped with another call. Thomas is calling. Can I conference him in? Whatever, William muttered. Claire connected the calls. Thomas? This whole thing is a sick joke, Thomas barked without preamble. $85 million dangled in front of us like carrots, making us jump through hoops. And now this final insult. It doesn't have to be an insult, Claire pleaded, her voice cracking. Maybe Dad just wanted someone impartial. Impartial? William cut in. Daniel was practically his adopted son. There's nothing impartial about him. Thomas's bitter laugh echoed through the line. The kid who replaced us gets to decide if we're good enough for Dad's money. Perfect. He didn't replace us, Claire sobbed. We left. We all left. Because he pushed us away, William shouted. Don't rewrite history, Claire. Dad chose solitude over reconciliation. He was too proud to call us, and now he's punishing us from the grave. The community center, Thomas said, his voice suddenly hollow. All that work. Those kids. I thought I was doing something that mattered. You were? Claire insisted. No. I was performing for an inheritance I'll never see. Claire sank onto her sofa, tears flowing freely now. What about Daniel? He seemed just as shocked as we were. Convenient, wasn't it? William's voice dripped with sarcasm. The perfect act of innocence. I don't think he was acting. Doesn't matter, Thomas said flatly. I'm calling my lawyer tomorrow. There has to be a way to contest this. William snorted. Good luck. Dad was thorough, if nothing else. So that's it? Claire whispered. We give up? After everything we've learned about Dad? About ourselves? Silence hung between them for several heartbeats. I can't do this anymore, Claire, William said finally. Every time I think I understand him, every time I start to forgive him, there's another trap, another test. I'm exhausted. Me too, Thomas admitted. Tell Daniel he can give my share to charity. At least something good will come from this mess. The call ended with no goodbyes, leaving Claire alone with the sound of rain against her windows. She tried calling Daniel next, but his phone went straight to voicemail. She left a message, voice trembling. Daniel, it's Claire. Please call me. None of this is your fault. Hours later, Claire sat at her kitchen table, a cold cup of tea before her. She'd pulled out an old photograph, Henry Morgan standing proudly beside his railroad engine, his uniform crisp, his smile reserved but genuine. It was taken before their mother died, before grief hardened him, before the arguments that drove them all apart. She traced her father's face with her fingertip, tears falling onto the glossy surface. Why did you do this to us? She whispered. Was it worth it, Dad? Was your lesson worth breaking us again? The photograph offered no answers, and the rain continued to fall. Morning broke with unexpected sunshine, the storm clouds of yesterday retreating like an apology. Daniel's text message had arrived on all three siblings' phones at dawn. Please meet me at the community center at 10. I need to explain. No lawyers, no will, just truth. Claire arrived first, dark circles beneath her eyes. Thomas pulled up minutes later, his usual polished appearance disheveled. William's truck rumbled into the parking lot last, his jaw set in a hard line as he slammed the door. They found Daniel waiting inside the newly painted gymnasium. He stood alone beneath the basketball hoop, looking small and vulnerable under the high ceiling. Thanks for coming, Daniel said, his voice echoing. I wasn't sure you would. Make it quick, William said. I've got work. Daniel nodded, taking a deep breath. I never knew about the codicil. Henry never told me I'd have any power over your inheritance. Convenient, Thomas muttered. It's the truth, Daniel insisted. And there's more truth you need to hear. He moved to a bench and picked up a battered shoebox. After my parents died, I was headed for trouble. Stealing, skipping school, fighting. Henry caught me trying to vandalize this very building 6 years ago. Daniel opened the box, pulling out photographs and letters. Instead of calling the police, he talked to me. Really talked. Offered me a job repairing things around here. Started teaching me about engines, tools, life. Claire stepped forward, examining a photo of Henry and Daniel fixing a bicycle. He looks happy. He was, sometimes. Daniel swallowed hard. But he was also broken. He talked about you three constantly. He kept every newspaper clipping about Thomas's business success. He drove past Claire's house on her birthday every year. He saved every unanswered letter he wrote to William. William flinched. Your father never wanted to replace you, Daniel continued, voice breaking. He needed somewhere to put all the love he still had when you pushed him away. I was just there. An orphan who gave him a second chance to be a father when his own children wouldn't speak to him. He handed William a faded notebook. This is his journal. Read any page. He never stopped loving you. His pride just wouldn't let him beg for forgiveness. William opened it reluctantly. His eyes widened as he read Henry's handwriting. William would have solved this engine problem in half the time. He always had better instincts than me. I'm not your enemy, Daniel pleaded, tears welling in his eyes. I'm not your replacement. I'm just proof that your father still had love to give. That's what he wanted you to see. Not that he found someone better, but that he never stopped being a father, even when he had no children who would claim him. Daniel's voice broke completely. He loved you so much until his last breath. The tears came then, a flood Daniel couldn't control. His shoulders shook as he covered his face, years of borrowed grief pouring out. The siblings stood frozen, watching this young man weep for their father, a father they'd abandoned but who had apparently never abandoned them. William moved first. Slowly, awkwardly, he crossed the gleaming gym floor. His hand, calloused and strong, came to rest on Daniel's trembling shoulder. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The touch said everything his pride had kept locked away for years. The cemetery lay quiet under an autumn sky, leaves painting the ground in russets and golds. For the first time since they'd gathered to lower Henry Morgan's casket into the earth 3 months ago, his children returned to his grave. This time, Daniel walked with them. Claire led the way, clutching a small bouquet of wildflowers. Thomas followed, hands in his pockets, shoulders no longer squared, with his usual confidence. William trailed behind, Henry's journal pressed against his chest like a shield. Daniel walked beside William, their footsteps falling into unconscious rhythm. They stopped before the simple headstone. Henry Morgan, 1945, 2023. Father and friend. The words seemed inadequate for the complicated man they'd come to honor. I brought these, Claire said, kneeling to place the flowers against the stone. They're the ones that used to grow behind the house. Remember how Mom loved them? She stayed on her knees, fingers tracing the engraved letters of her father's name. I'm sorry, Dad. I judged you so harshly. I thought you were cold, but I was the cold one. Her voice cracked. I was so busy being hurt that I couldn't see you were hurting too. All those years I could have visited. All those holidays you spent alone. Thomas stepped forward next, clearing his throat. I was so caught up in proving myself, in showing you I didn't need your approval, that I never stopped to think you might be proud of me anyway. He wiped at his eyes. All those donations to the center, you never wanted recognition. And here I was, chasing praise from strangers when I could have just come home. William remained frozen, clutching the journal tighter. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. I burned your letters. Everyone that came after our fight. His shoulders began to shake. I was so certain I was right. So sure you needed to apologize first. He dropped to his knees beside Claire, tears streaming freely down his weathered face. And now, I'll never know what you wanted to tell me. I'll never hear your voice again. I'll never... His words dissolved into quiet sobs. Claire wrapped her arm around his shoulders, pulling him close as Thomas knelt on his other side. Daniel hesitated, then stepped forward and placed his hand on the headstone. Thank you, Henry, he said simply. You saved my life. You showed me what it meant to be a man when I had no one else to learn from. His voice grew steadier. I'll keep the promises I made to you. I'll make you proud. They remained there in silence, the wind rustling through the cemetery trees. After what felt like both seconds and hours, William rose unsteadily to his feet. He extended one hand to Daniel while keeping his other arm around Claire. "He would have wanted us together," William said. "All of us." Thomas joined their circle, completing the link. 4 people bound by one man's love, a love they'd nearly thrown away but had somehow found again. They stood hand in hand before Henry's grave, united for the first time in decades, not by grief or obligation or the promise of inheritance, but by something Henry had hoped for all along: forgiveness, both for him and for each other. As they walked back toward their cars, William kept his arm around Daniel's shoulders. "Tell me that story again," he said quietly. "The one about Dad teaching you to fix engines." Daniel smiled. "It started with an old lawnmower he found by the side of the road." The sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the Oak Ridge nursing home, warming the common room as Claire led her brothers and Daniel inside. Mrs. Hargrove spotted them first, her face lighting up with delight. "You brought your family!" she exclaimed, clapping her hands together. Her thin fingers trembled with excitement. Claire nodded, feeling a warmth spread through her chest at the word family. 2 weeks ago, she wouldn't have included Daniel in that category. Now, it felt incomplete without him. "Mrs. Hargrove, these are my brothers, Thomas and William, and this is Daniel." The elderly woman reached for Daniel's hand. "Henry talked about you, said you reminded him of himself when he was young." Daniel's eyes widened. "He talked about me here? Oh my, yes. He volunteered every Thursday for years, brought his harmonica and played for us." William exchanged a look with Thomas. Neither had known. Soon, the common room filled with residents eager to meet Henry Morgan's children. Claire pulled out a worn hymnal she'd found in her father's house. "Dad marked his favorites," she explained. "I thought maybe we could sing a few." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "I haven't sung since high school choir." "It's like riding a bike," Claire insisted. "Besides, nobody here is expecting perfection." William surprised them by taking the book first. "Amazing Grace," he read. He used to hum this while he worked in the garage. They began tentatively, voices rough with disuse and emotion. Daniel joined in, his clear tenor providing gentle guidance. By the second verse, several residents had added their wavering voices. By the third, the room rang with song. Thomas slipped out briefly, returning with a surprise 5 children from the community center, carrying handmade cards for the residents. "Miss Kelsey helped them make these," he explained, as the kids shyly distributed their artwork. "They've been asking to meet the people I've been telling them about." The room transformed with the children's presence. Laughter replaced the solemnity of hymns as residents shared stories and admired colorful drawings. A little girl with braids sat beside Mrs. Hargrove, carefully showing her how to make a paper crane. William found himself sitting with Mr. Peterson, a former railroad worker who had known Henry. Hesitantly, William pulled out one of his father's letters. "Would you mind if I read this to you?" he asked. "I'm trying to understand him better." Mr. Peterson nodded, settling back in his chair. William's voice started low but gained strength as he read Henry's words of pride in his son's accomplishments, his regrets over their estrangement, his hopes for reconciliation. Other residents gathered around, drawn by the raw emotion in William's voice. When he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the circle. "That sounds like the Henry I knew," Mr. Peterson said. "A man of few words, but when he spoke, you listened." The afternoon passed in a blur of songs, stories, and unexpected connections. Claire watched as Thomas taught a group of kids and seniors a simple hand-clapping game. Daniel helped a resident FaceTime with his grandson. William read 2 more letters, each one revealing another facet of their father's heart. As they finally prepared to leave, Claire stood in the doorway, watching her brothers and Daniel say their goodbyes. The scene before her, this blending of generations, this healing of old wounds, filled her with something she hadn't felt in years: peace. Thomas joined her at the door. "We should do this again," he said. Claire nodded, throat tight with emotion. "This is the inheritance Dad wanted for us," she whispered. "Not the money. This." The lawyer's office felt different this time. Gone was the chill that had pervaded their first meeting. Sunlight streamed through the half-open blinds, casting warm stripes across the polished oak table where the Morgan siblings sat waiting. Claire fidgeted with her bracelet, a nervous habit from childhood. Thomas checked his watch every few minutes, though he had nowhere else to be. William stared at the wall, where framed law degrees hung in perfect alignment. When Daniel entered, they all straightened. He looked different 2 shoulders back, chin up, though his hands trembled slightly as he placed a folder on the table. The lawyer followed, nodding respectfully to everyone before taking his seat. "Thank you all for coming," the lawyer began. "As you know, We're here to finalize Henry Morgan's will. According to the codicil, Daniel must determine if the conditions have been met satisfactorily. He turned to Daniel. The floor is yours. Daniel cleared his throat. His eyes moved from face to face, lingering on each sibling. When Henry first told me about this plan, I thought he was wrong, he began, his voice soft but steady. I told him it wasn't fair to put this burden on any of you or on me, but he was stubborn. William's mouth twitched in an almost smile. That he was. Henry didn't do this to punish you, Daniel continued. He did it because he believed in who you could be, who you were beneath all the hurt and anger. He opened the folder, revealing photographs, recent ones. Claire singing with the nursing home residents. Thomas working alongside children at the community center. William reading Henry's letters aloud. I've watched you all these weeks. I've seen Claire find compassion for strangers who reminded her of her father. I've seen Thomas discover generosity he never knew he had. And William, Daniel's voice caught. I've seen William face his deepest regrets and choose forgiveness instead of bitterness. Claire wiped a tear from her cheek. Thomas stared at his hands. Henry told me once that wealth is meaningless unless it comes with wisdom. He wanted you to inherit both. Daniel took a deep breath. You've proven yourselves not because you completed tasks, but because you allowed yourselves to be changed by them. He looked at the lawyer. They've met the conditions. They should receive their inheritance, all of it, as Henry intended. The lawyer nodded, reaching for documents to sign. But Daniel wasn't finished. There's one more thing Henry wanted me to tell you, he said. Daniel's voice trembled now. He said that loving you was the greatest privilege of his life, even when it hurt the most. William stood suddenly, chair scraping against the floor. For a heartbeat, the room froze. Then William crossed to Daniel and pulled him into a fierce embrace. Thank you, he whispered, voice rough with emotion, for being there when we weren't. Claire joined them next, her arms encircling both men. Thomas hesitated only a moment before adding his embrace to the circle. Welcome to the family, Thomas said gruffly. For real, this time. Daniel closed his eyes, overwhelmed. In that moment, he understood what Henry had truly given him, not a role as judge, but a place in a healing family. The lawyer watched silently, documents momentarily forgotten. This, he realized, was Henry Morgan's true legacy, not millions in the bank, but hearts finally opened, wounds beginning to heal, and a family circle widened to include one more. 6 weeks after the reading of the final codicil, the Morgan siblings gathered around a conference table at Westridge Community Bank. Each signed their name to a series of documents establishing the Henry Morgan Foundation. Claire's elegant script, Thomas's bold strokes, and William's careful letters marked the beginning of something their father could only have dreamed about. That's the last one, said the bank manager, collecting the papers. Congratulations. With the initial endowment of $30 million, the foundation will support the community center, nursing home programs, and educational scholarships for years to come. Thomas leaned back, a satisfied smile crossing his face. Dad would have liked this. No flash, just substance. He lived that way his whole life, Claire said. We just never noticed. William nodded. He hid his light. We won't make that mistake with his legacy. Later that afternoon, they drove to the community center, where construction crews were finishing the major renovations. The basketball court gleamed with fresh paint. New windows flooded the space with natural light. Children already played on new equipment in the adjacent playground. Daniel waited for them by the entrance, clipboard in hand. Since taking charge of the renovation project, he'd revealed a natural talent for management that impressed even Thomas, who'd offered him a position at his company. The kitchen equipment arrives tomorrow, Daniel reported as they walked through the building, and the computer lab is already up and running. Those kids couldn't believe they had new computers, William said, clapping Daniel on the shoulder. You should have seen their faces. I did, Daniel grinned. I've got pictures. We'll need those for the family album, Claire said, linking her arm through Daniel's. The phrase family album hung in the air between them, new and fragile, but undeniably real. The four of them had fallen into a rhythm these past weeks. Sunday dinners at Claire's house, Saturday mornings helping at the community center, evening phone calls just to check in. Small moments that stitched together the torn fabric of their family. On Thanksgiving Day, Claire's dining room bustled with activity. Thomas carved the turkey while William set the table with their mother's china, unused for years. Daniel arranged flowers in the centerpiece, his nervous hands steadier now among family. More cranberry sauce? Claire called from the kitchen. Only if you made it the way Dad liked it, William called back, with those orange peels. Of course I did, Claire appeared, carrying a crystal bowl. Some traditions are worth keeping. When they finally sat down, The table groaned with dishes, all their childhood favorites, plus a pecan pie Daniel had baked from his foster mother's recipe. They linked hands around the table, a circle unbroken. "Someone should say something," Claire whispered. William cleared his throat. "Dad would have loved this. All of us together." "He's here," Daniel said quietly, "in all of this." Thomas raised his glass. "To Henry Morgan, who found a way to bring us back together, even if we made him take the long road." "To Dad," Claire echoed, her eyes bright with tears. "And to family," Daniel added, "found and rebuilt." They ate and laughed and shared stories until evening shadows lengthened across the floor. Old memories mingled with new ones. The bitterness that had poisoned their hearts for so long had begun to dissolve, replaced by something sweeter: purpose, connection, and the simple joy of belonging. As twilight settled over the house, Claire realized they'd been at the table for hours, no one wanting the moment to end. It was the first truly joyful holiday they'd shared in decades, and it wouldn't be the last. Spring sunshine bathed the freshly painted walls of the community center on dedication day. A red ribbon stretched across the entrance, waiting to be cut. Banners fluttered in the gentle breeze, and balloons bobbed in clusters of blue and silver, Henry's favorite colors. Though none of his children had realized this until Daniel mentioned it, Claire smoothed her dress nervously. "Do you think there'll be enough people?" William laughed, gesturing toward the parking lot where cars continued to arrive. "Half the town is here already." Thomas adjusted his tie, scanning the crowd with amazement. "I didn't realize Dad knew so many people." "He didn't talk about it," Daniel said, "but he touched a lot of lives." The siblings exchanged glances, still processing this version of their father, the quiet benefactor, the silent supporter, the man who gave without recognition. The mayor approached the microphone set up on the front steps. "Ladies and gentlemen, we gather today to celebrate the reopening and renaming of our beloved community center." The crowd quieted as he continued. "For years, this center has been the heart of our community. Now, thanks to the extraordinary generosity of the Morgan family, it'll serve our town for generations to come." Children from the center's after-school program lined up beside the podium, each holding a letter that together spelled, "Thank you, Morgans." An elderly woman from the nursing home where Claire volunteered wiped tears from her eyes. The basketball team Thomas had begun coaching stood tall in their new uniforms. "And now," the mayor announced, "I invite William, Claire, Thomas, and Daniel Morgan to unveil the plaque and officially open the Henry Morgan Community Center." The siblings stepped forward together. Daniel hesitated until Claire pulled him along, whispering, "Your family now. He'd want you here." They reached for the cloth covering the bronze plaque. On the count of 3, they pulled it away. There was their father's name, gleaming in the sunlight. Beneath it, the words, "Giving quietly, loving deeply." Claire's vision blurred with tears. Thomas's jaw tightened as he fought for control. William stood stone still, his hand pressed against the cool metal of the plaque. Daniel traced the letters of Henry's name with trembling fingers. The crowd erupted in applause. Children released colorful balloons into the sky. The high school band struck up a cheerful tune. "I never thought I'd see his name and feel pride instead of anger," William murmured. "He'd be embarrassed by all this attention," Thomas said with a small smile. "No," Claire shook her head. "He'd be happy we're together. That's all he ever wanted." They watched as people streamed into the center, exclaiming over the new facilities. Children raced to the gym. Seniors gathered in the new reading room named for Mrs. Hargrove. Teenagers headed for the computer lab. In each corner of the building, Henry's legacy lived on, not just in the foundation's money, but in the laughter echoing off the walls, in the community gathering together, in the family he had finally managed to reunite. As the crowds thinned, the siblings remained by the plaque, arms around each other's shoulders. They formed a circle, heads bowed together. "We did it, Dad," Claire whispered. "We finally understood," Thomas added. "We're home," William said simply. Daniel completed their circle, belonging at last. "And we're family." High above, as if in blessing, a shaft of sunlight broke through the clouds, warming their upturned faces. A month after the dedication, Henry's old porch creaked beneath rocking chairs and the weight of family once more. The evening air carried the scent of Claire's apple pie cooling on the windowsill, and the distant laughter of children playing in the yard. William's teenage sons tossed a football, while Thomas's daughters helped Daniel's fiancée Sarah set up a table for dessert. The siblings settled into a familiar formation, the same spots they'd occupied as children during those long-ago summer evenings when their father taught them to identify constellations. Dad always sat right there. Claire pointed to the weathered rocker William now occupied. Remember how he'd watch the sunset every single night? Never missed it. Thomas nodded. I used to think he was just avoiding us. I thought he was hiding, William admitted. Turns out he was just thinking. Daniel leaned against the porch railing. He told me once that sunset was God's way of reminding us to pause and be grateful for another day. He smiled softly. I never saw him miss one in all the years I knew him. The sky blazed orange and pink, casting long shadows across the lawn that Henry had once meticulously maintained. The property belonged to all of them now, a shared retreat rather than a house of memories too painful to revisit. Remember when he built that treehouse? Thomas gestured toward the massive oak. Spent every weekend on it for a month. Claire laughed. Mom kept saying it was dangerous, but he insisted every kid needed a hideaway. He rebuilt it for me when I came to live with him, Daniel said quietly. Said some things were worth preserving. William's face softened. I thought he was so rigid, so unbending, but he was just steady. They fell silent, watching the sun sink lower. I found this yesterday, William finally said, pulling an envelope from his pocket. It was in his toolbox in the shed. It's dated after all the others. The siblings exchanged glances. His final letter, Claire whispered. William nodded, carefully breaking the seal Henry had pressed closed years ago. My dear children, he began, his voice steady despite the emotion building in his chest. If you're reading this, you found your way back to each other, which is all I ever wanted. The porch fell silent except for William's voice, and the distant calls of birds settling for the night. I made many mistakes. I grew silent when I should have spoken, retreated when I should have reached out. After your mother died, I didn't know how to be both parents to you. My own father never showed affection, and I found myself becoming him despite my best intentions. The sun touched the horizon now, golden light washing over their faces. Daniel taught me it wasn't too late to change. Through him, I practiced the love I wished I'd shown you. I hope in time you can see that loving him wasn't replacing you, it was learning how to be the father I failed to be. William's voice broke slightly, but he continued. The money means nothing. The lessons of forgiveness, compassion, and family are everything. If you can forgive me, you will find that love was always my greatest gift. As the last rays of sun disappeared, William folded the letter. No one spoke as tears flowed freely. Claire reached for Thomas's hand. Daniel bowed his head. William looked out at the darkening yard, feeling his father's presence all around them. Their children came onto the porch, drawn by the silence, and the circle widened to embrace them all, Henry's legacy continuing in ways money could never measure. If you enjoyed the story of Henry Morgan, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.